that's what I would say. I've learned that you can really do all of the things. You just have to really believe that you can, know that you can, and then sort of create a plan for it, right? Nothing comes without planning, really. I mean, even luck, I think, comes from planning.
Hi everyone, Elle Ballard is here with you today, and I have our next guest on this podcast, and I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Hi Miranda,
Hi,
welcome.
I'm
Hi.
here.
Yes, thank you for taking the time. Before we jump on, I would like to introduce Miranda first. So, with over 20 years of experience as an in-house legal counsel, Miranda is a seasoned leader and a legal creative who loves helping people and businesses succeed. As a general counsel at Oyster, Miranda is building a legal framework for making cross-border employment easier, supporting global expansion for businesses, and helping to bring remote work to talented people everywhere. She leverages her expertise in employment law, litigation, risk management, and legal operations to deliver forward-thinking, business-minded solutions with sustainable results. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yes, and I'm excited as well for this conversation. I think it's going to be very useful, very needed. It's such a big field. And I know we just had a short conversation before this that will be continued, I'm sure. But one of the questions that I like to ask at the beginning is what brought you to do this work?
Sure. Well, I think I'm here because I love solving problems. In school and my first legal jobs, I found that, while being a lawyer is perfectly lovely and fine, what I really enjoyed about my job was learning about my customers, my clients, and how their business worked and what went wrong that led to the lawsuit that I was defending. And how could we make it better? And really helping to build Oyster has been a dream come true because my legal expertise is our product. So it's a little bit like if you were an architect and you got to build your dream house. That's sort of like my reality at Oyster. I get to take everything that I know about employment law and everything I love about learning about our customers and help them expand, help them be successful, help them really mitigate the risk that they might solve otherwise and grow their companies and hire people all over the world. And that's been really exciting. Continues to be challenging. It's just great to come to work every day.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love meeting and talking to people who just love what they do on a daily basis. It's just so important, right? To just to do the work that your heart wants. And I can only imagine how interesting this would be. As we talked previously, I've touched that field a little bit in my previous company back in Kazakhstan, just a touch of it. And it's just such a interesting field, but at the same time, it's been 20 years ago, so I'm sure it grew. And as we are becoming more global, which we'll talk about this, it's just becoming so much more interesting. As you are helping Oyster and sharing your expertise and growing in your field and gaining this experience, what are some of the lessons that you learned in this field, or generally really building your career?
Yeah, what I would say is that, and I think I'm still learning that, and that's one of the things that I love, but personally, like you can do what you set your mind to.
Mhm.
Um, And if that is building a company that is in 60 countries, you can do it. It's just a matter of deciding and knowing that you can. And I think that I personally, from a career perspective, struggled with that early on. And we I guess call it imposter syndrome now, but I feel like I felt that I was boxed in by what I perceived an employment litigator did
Mhm.
specifically.
Yeah.
And the reality is the information and the skills that I was learning made me very capable of doing all sorts of things that weren't necessarily lawyer jobs. They were business jobs and they were consulting jobs. Really being able for me to see myself as something other than just the lawyer was a process, and it's something that I had to kind of change internally and had to frankly have people outside of me validate, and affirm that, oh yeah, you can do that, like that's exactly where you should be. So that's what I would say. I've learned that you can really do all of the things. You just have to really believe that you can, know that you can, and then sort of create a plan for it, right? Nothing comes without planning, really. I mean, even luck, I think, comes from planning. That's what I would say. Just
I love
know that
that.
you're capable, and really, really just sort of what do you decide what you want to do. I think that's half the battle now with really so much opportunity for folks is deciding like, what is the one thing that makes me happy to go to work every day, happy
Yeah.
to get up and walk out the door.
Yes, yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I can absolutely relate with imposter syndrome and everything. And it's so interesting how a lot of the times we kind of stop ourselves. We have the where we stop ourselves in doing something, and in a me, I guess, right? To
Yeah.
finding these reasons, and it's just so interesting when we take that away completely and imagine this situation where we don't have any limits or obstacles. We are so powerful. It's just amazing to me, and seeing it in myself. It was every step and growth I'm making, and growing every single day to just realize that alone just worth it. It's a beautiful journey. Thank you for sharing that. I love it.
No, I appreciate it. No, it's interesting because I do think that I mean, there are some real obstacles, right? They're not necessarily just those that we place on some real obstacles. And I think that how you can internalize those and then make them your own in a way
Yeah.
that is not healthy. So then when those external obstacles are removed, then you're still sort of stuck where you could be. And so I think that it is really important to kind of like reevaluate why you think certain things, and how are you limiting yourself?
Mhm.
Because I certainly do think that we create additional limits for ourselves that aren't really there. And we have to kind of see them and move past them.
So speaking about the limits, we are Women of the World Network community representing 22 plus countries, women from 22 plus countries. And I always like to ask this question. Tell us where you are from, where you were born, and what do you think limited or favored you in your upbringing?
Sure. Well, I'm from Georgia in the US. And we moved around a lot through my parents' jobs and schooling. So, and then as an adult, I've moved around a lot following my husband's jobs. And so I think I've lived in 15-ish places, or
Oh,
had lived in 15-ish places by the time I hit 30. So it's a lot. And I would say that had served me very well in that I've started over so many times.
yeah.
And what I've learned is that there's always a reason that you're going to be starting over, and it makes you a stronger person, or it can. And personally, I certainly think it's led me to be more open, more akin to saying, more likely to say yes to things. It has made me less wary of strangers, and I'm using strangers generally,
Yeah.
but also specifically, if I saw you on the street, I'd say hi to you. But also, it really, I look to embrace new people,
Mhm.
in a way that I love. I love meeting new people. I love learning about new places. I rarely would discount anything because I don't know what my tomorrow might look like.
Yeah.
Maybe I will be there soon. So I think that it has created a capacity for absorbing change, an outlook that is really kind of open to
Mhm.
possibility. Though it sucked a lot as a kid, frankly, right? As a kid, you don't love it, but I have a lot of pen pals and friends, and now with social media all over the world, that I get to visit and keep up with and continue to kind of learn from. So that's really a great benefit. But it was a little bit tricky growing up, having to make that much change.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So that's always such a learning experience, but we only realize it later, right?
Yeah,
We don't see it at a time, but then we were like, oh wow, there's so many lessons there. Okay, beautiful. So I want to come back to really your field of work because it's so interesting and I feel like it's evolving every single day, right? And it's changing and growing. And so we live in such a global and interconnected world, and during pandemic it got even closer. It was with this online opportunities. I want to talk about major considerations, maybe companies need to think about, or businesses, small businesses or mid-sized businesses need to think about, to have on their radar, and maybe tips for those who are working with remote contractors in different countries, or looking to hire, those contractors in different countries. What would be some of the considerations you would recommend to think about?
sure. I think we're at an interesting moment in time, right? Because of technology that allows us to kind of converse over vast distance easily and in person almost. And COVID, right? Because of the pandemic, we ended up all at home, all communicating and making this virtual relationship real in ways that they weren't previously. It really opened up folks' uh, eyes about hiring
Mhm.
and talent and where you might find it. Um, Simultaneously, labor sparse. People are finding great jobs, which means in your local market, maybe you can't afford the talent or find the talent that you need. So you're having to look further afield. And then lastly, we've had this macroeconomic condition where it's expensive. Inflation is real. The cost of talent has increased. So companies, particularly those that are new and that are trying to scale and grow, are having to deal with increased costs of labor.
Mhm.
So all of this leads us to kind of looking outside of our yard for talented people. And they may be instead of across the street, they may be across the globe. And Oyster was founded with that in mind. And we help businesses to hire contractors and full-time employees around the world. And we try to be the easy button. That's the way I think about it for folks that are thinking about that, because it can be really daunting as an entrepreneur, right? You're like, okay, well, I've heard or I've met someone that is excellent at doing my social media or helping me to develop my website, maybe fulfilling my orders, but
Mhm.
they happen to be in X country. How do I
Yeah.
do that?
Mhm.
Um, most entrepreneurs and small companies will start with contractors, and that makes sense because you don't necessarily have a presence somewhere. The work that you're asking this person to do is probably not their entire day's work, so it's incremental to them. And that just is the cost effective way for you to do it. So if you are one of those folks that are hiring contractors, or you want to hire a full-time employee, or you're not sure what you need, let's talk about a couple of those items where you could sort of parse out the two. A contractor is an independent contractor. And I want to stress that word, independent. If you're hiring someone as a contractor, you're sort of expecting them to be able to do the work independently. That means without your direction, without you dictating like the how, the why, when they do it. You're just going to say, hey, I need a marketing plan. Can you get it to me by next week? And they're going to say, great, yes, I'll do that. They will be independent, which means they may be doing work for someone else. They, in fact, probably are doing work for someone else. They are acting as a business themselves. So they may have their own contracts, they may have their own confidentiality requirements of you, and what have you. It's a business to business transaction. And that's how you should think about it. If the engagements and the workers that you're using are operating in that way, truly like a business to business partnership, then they're probably an independent contractor, and you're good to continue with your relationship in that way. If the relationship starts changing a little bit, the work relationship is not as independent, and in fact, maybe you're asking them to spend most of their time working for you every day. You're really dictating like how they're doing their work. You're saying they need to use a particular software tool. You're saying they need to make sure to copy this particular person. You're really, I don't want to say micromanaging, but you are definitely controlling the way that they are doing their work. Maybe you're saying, here is a computer, I want you to use my equipment. You're saying, I don't want you to work for my competitor. These are types of things that sort of, they are changing the relationship from one between two businesses to one that you're really telling this worker what you want done and how. That's where you start to move more into the employment arena. And when that happens, if you don't recognize that and make changes to your agreements, your arrangements, then you do run a risk of being found to be they call it a hidden employer in some places. Worker misclassification is what you often hear about. But it is essentially that employee, that worker can now say, hey, we may have signed a contractor agreement, but in reality, I'm your employee. And by the way, you need to pay for my social contributions, my benefits. You need to pay employment taxes to the government where I live. By the way, you also need to contribute to my pension because that's what's required in this particular country. So things can go off the rails if you get too far into that new relationship without sort of redefining it, making sure that you have the right sort of employment requirements in place in that location.
Yeah.
And that's where partners like Oyster or other payroll providers can come in and help you if you have progressed to that next stage of your relationship.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and thank you for covering that difference between, because I see where we can be, it can start as the business growing, right? And so that's between contractor and employee. So thank you for going over that. So what is like if a person has her own business and she is looking to hire a contractor overseas, does Oyster help with contracts? And maybe what are the two things need to be considered for those contracts?
Sure. So absolutely. Oyster helps folks hire contractors and pay them through our system. And we provide contracts that are compliant in those particular countries. Things that you should think about when you're hiring a contractor are, does that contractor need to be registered? Because there are some countries where contractors must register with their government. And that's for taxation reasons and things. So you should find that out. Then once you have as you were building your contracts, there are a couple of things you should think about. First, those indicia of employment that we were talking about before, control, how they're paid, the hours they have to work. Make sure that your paper contract is really clear of what you are controlling and what you're not controlling. And in fact, many contractor agreements say the contractor can fulfill the scope as they choose. So make sure that your contract actually reflects the relationship.
Yeah.
So that's a really important piece of it. And then the other thing I would say is if you are dealing in an environment where it's really important to protect your intellectual property, I would take a second glance at any confidentiality or intellectual property parts of that agreement. Because if you're hiring someone to develop content for you, or to help write articles or books or anything like that, or develop code for an app that you're building, let's say, you want that intellectual property. And if it is not properly contracted to you, then you may not own your own intellectual property. And that's something that, at the beginning, when you're starting out, you may not think about, but as that app becomes like the hot app in the App Store for 2025, you really want to make sure that that intellectual property is yours. So thinking about that from the beginning is important. So make sure the contract represents your actual relationship. Make sure that the intellectual property piece is covered. And I would say make sure that you check up on your agreement. Relationships change in business just like they do in personal relationships. And the work that someone was doing on that contract 6 months ago may not be the same. So you might want to think about every 6 months is a really good timestamp to kind of evaluate those ongoing contractors that you have and say like, okay, well, is this still accurate? If it is, great. And if not, maybe let's make some changes. That's what I would encourage, that sort of health check.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great. Yeah, IP protection is so big, and thank you so much for sharing those. Yeah, and yeah, all of those things, yeah, it's so important to consider. So if the listeners today have questions, further considerations, maybe something you shared sparked their additional questions, some insights, how can they connect with Oyster?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to Oyster at oysterhr.com. We have a lot of tools available for folks if they want to visit the platform. Misclassification analyzers, the real cost of doing business or hiring in certain countries. If you're thinking about, oh, well, I might want to try this out. It gives you some resources to kind of understand what the employment markets are in those places and how to go about doing that, or about engaging those folks and kind of maintaining those relationships. So look forward to chatting with anyone, and certainly like anyone that's interested in Oyster, love to have you visit our site.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Brenda. So much knowledge, so much, so many things to think about. So check out Oyster, especially if you're planning to operate in different countries, planning to expand, planning to scale. So definitely, and we will post those links in the comments of the video or podcast. So feel free to do that. And I am moving to our final section, which will be rapid fire questions section of
Fun.
our conversation today. And I just have 5 questions. Are you ready?
I think so. I'm like, I need to hold on to the tape. I do think so.
Okay. First question is, your favorite book name is?
This year, it's The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. It's a story about life and death and how we choose to live, frankly. Really short, great read.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. I'll have to check that out. Beach or mountains?
Beach every day.
Favorite international destination to visit?
I can't answer that question. I would say my favorite destination is the next one. I love travel. I lived in Turkey for a while, so I think if I had to pick a fan favorite, I would say like Turkey. You could visit every single weekend and always find something new and different and beautiful. So
Fabulous.
that's a fan favorite.
Awesome. I love it. We're actually going to Turkey. We're doing a Turkey retreat next year.
Ah,
Great.
oh my goodness. Well, we'll have to talk. We'll have to talk about
Yes.
all the places you'll see because it's just an amazing place to visit.
Yes. Yes. I agree. I love it too. Summer or winter?
Summer goes along with the beach.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And the final question is things that you have discovered about yourself recently.
I would say that I've discovered recently that sleeping late is a luxury,
Oh,
a true
yes.
luxury, and I can afford it every day.
Yes.
I should not feel guilty about it.
Yes. I
Yeah,
love it. Yes.
that is what I've learned, that sleeping late really makes everything better, and I can do that.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I so agree. I really feel it. Those nights where I don't have my good sleep, enough sleep, I just feel it throughout the day. Thank you for playing. Thank you for sharing.
For having me. This has
That's,
been a really great time.
it's been great. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today, Miranda.
Thank you for having me, and I hope to talk more.
Yes, definitely. Bye for now.